Hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to everyone watching the replay as well. It is evening here, so you'll always find me wearing my blue light blockers in the evening as the sun's starting to set. I mean, it's not quite setting yet. It's still a little bit early, but it's not that far from my bedtime. I'm an early to bed kind of person. And I have had noticeable differences in the way that I sleep when I use my blue light blockers in the evening. So for many of my recordings, you will find me like this when I do work in the evening. I'm going to get stuck straight into it because I have so much to share with you, and I tend to get a little bit passionate and go off on tangents. And I will try not to do that, and I will try and stick to the notes that I have set for myself. Otherwise, we could be here for quite some time. But very briefly, for those that don't know me and what I do, I won't go fully into my story and my health journey um, now, but I will touch on it throughout the evening because I can tell you that I have been where you are right now. My name's Tris. I'm a mum of a 1.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, very, very active boys. They very much keep me on my toes. I'm also a wife, and I'm very passionate about women's health. I'm a clinical nutritionist on paper, so I studied a Bachelor of Health Science in Nutritional Medicine. But I feel like when most people hear nutritionist, it kind of gives this idea of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to come to you, you're going to give me a meal plan, and that's sort of the extent to the work that I do. But it's very, very different to that. I actually combine functional testing, nutrition using both food as medicine to help the body heal. It might be specific protocols that we use for a healing phase, as well as health optimization. So, how we should be eating as women that is going to support optimal health and support optimal female biology. I also combine my work with menstrual cycle awareness and cyclical living. So, helping women to really, truly deeply understand their menstrual cycles, their hormones, their bodies, and how to live more in connection with that, whether it's our food, whether it's our the way that we work, the way that we live, our self-care practices. And my main goal, my goal, like really what I want for women is for them to be more deeply connected to themselves. I want them to come home to themselves, and I want them to live the nourished, vibrant, and confident version of themselves that's already waiting for you. That's what I want for you. Now, I have a method that I use called the Nourished Feminine Method. And it's something that I've been creating over the years working with women and understanding not only the pillars of health that we need to, consider and to integrate into our lives to feel really vibrant and healthy and to have optimal hormone health and optimal health, but also the order in which we need to do things to promote healing with the body, and then also the mindset of actually creating change, because that's a whole another layer. It's, we could have all of the best strategies and protocols, but we need to be able to actually integrate them into our life. And for me, I am a busy mom. I hold the, like many of you, all of the hats. We wear so many different hats, and life can feel really full, beautifully full, challengingly full. And so I think I've really, through having my boys, I've really come to learn, um, that incorporating these health practices and creating a really healthy life um, is certainly more challenging as a mother. It certainly comes with more challenges, but it's not impossible. And that's what I love to support women with, busy women, mothers, the women that really need the support, or women that feel like they have not gotten answers and are going round and round in circles with symptoms that they're not getting resolution for. Now, so since studying my bachelor degree, I've also mentored with some really incredible practitioners in the holistic health space, including a woman by the name of Amanda Traeger from Naturopathic Womancraft. And she was really a catalyst for me deepening my understanding of the menstrual cycle, not just from a physical perspective, so what I'd learned through formal education, but also through a mental, emotional, an energetic lens. And I think that, I really discovered the depth to which we can experience our menstrual cycles and how our menstrual cycles shape us from our very first period through womanhood, through pregnancy and childbirth, into motherhood, into peri and post menopause, but also how our menstrual cycles experience, like how we experience that and how that impacts our daily lives. So, our hormones really shape everything. Um, and it really impacts every system in our body. So our energy, our metabolism, our mood, our sleep patterns, our fertility, immune and gut function, our brain cognition, these are all impacted by hormones. And I think when a lot of us think of hormones, we immediately think of our menstrual cycle hormones, but there are hundreds of hormones in the body and they play roles in so many different areas of the body, but they all are connected to each other. So our menstrual cycle hormones are impacted by numerous other hormones in the body. And actually, hormones work from a brain down and body up way. And that's the way that I work with clients. And what I mean by that is our brain is the master signal for our hormones, for the production, for the secretion, for how much needs to be produced. That starts actually from our circadian rhythm, our 24-hour clock, governs what our brain tells the rest of our body to produce in the way of hormones. And that's why, I mentioned my blue light blockers at the start because it's our light and dark environment signals to the brain, and that impacts the circadian rhythm, those 24-hour clocks, which then impacts our infradian rhythm, our menstrual cycle hormones. So the other part of our menstrual cycles that I wanted to talk about was that I really think that when you learn about your cycles, when you learn about your hormones and your female body, your female physiology, you do learn to have a deeper connection to self. And not only that, but you can then trust and feel confident when it comes to making choices for your nutrition and health instead of feeling really bombarded or overwhelmed with all of the information out there. So, as I began my deeper connection with my menstrual cycle and deeper connection to myself, and I started to integrate living more in alignment with our cycles, not just my cycle, not just my menstrual cycle, but nature's cycles, the seasons, the circadian, like daily rhythms. And I looked at things from my food, my movement, my self-care practices, supplementation, even the way that I run my business, all with the lens of like my menstrual cycle and the way that I feel like optimally, or the things that I can do optimally through different phases of my cycle. And that has had a profound impact on the way that my life looks and feels. Now, I know for many of you here tonight, you are wanting to learn about how to get answers for your symptoms. So you're probably sitting here thinking like, that's all great about the menstrual cycle and hormones and, nutrition and lifestyle, but like, I just really want to know how to get rid of my symptoms and I really want to get answers. And that is exactly what we're doing here tonight. But I can tell you that learning about your hormones and your bodies and your cycles and learning to nourish and support your body in alignment with your cycles is what leads to health transformation. I like to look at the menstrual cycle like a doorway or a portal, a bit of a roadmap into listening to what your body is communicating, because symptoms are your body's way of signaling to you, of communicating with you, of telling you like, hey, something's up right now, something's not functioning quite right, I need something from you. And so we just need to learn to listen, to interpret the data that we get from tests, to listen to the signs and symptoms that our body is telling us, and then begin to make changes from that place. Okay, so this masterclass is for you if you are experiencing symptoms. It might be PMS, heavy or painful periods, fatigue, brain fog, cycle irregularity. Maybe you're in perimenopause or you're not sure if you are, or you're experiencing some changes. And actually, interestingly, I would say with perimenopause, in very, very early perimenopause, well before changes happen with your menstrual cycle, so or any of the sort of later perimenopause, menopause symptoms before the night sweats and all that sort of thing that people talk about, well before that, I notice women in their late 30s and early 40s that experience changes to their stress resiliency. That is the first thing that changes in early perimenopause, well before anything to do with our menstrual cycle is women experiencing a loss of stress resiliency, where they just feel like they are become more triggered, more irritable, more more PMS might come up. Um, just feeling like they're not handling things as at higher capacity as they used to before. And so I think that's really interesting, and it is a shift with hormones that is contributing to that, because some of the first hormones that change as we enter that phase is DHA drops off, which is an adrenal hormone. So our adrenals become more under strain, and also progesterone drops off. And progesterone is a anti-inflammatory, mood stabilizing, supports sleep. It has so many benefits. So and also, there's some really interesting research at the moment, or more recently. So, previously, all of the research in menopause was literally done on postmenopausal women. So, women once their periods had actually ceased and they were in menopause. So, most of the research was around that. And there was very little research in perimenopause. So, that transition phase, which can be 7 to 10 years on average. Um, there's more and more research coming out about that now, which is incredible to see, because then it gives us as practitioners more information and more data to go by about how we can better support women through this phase. Anyway, so I'm going off track. Like I said, I do go off on tangents. So perimenopause changes, skin issues, mood shifts, just feeling like you're not yourself anymore. Maybe you've had some tests done and you're told that everything is normal, but you feel anything but. Maybe you've even been diagnosed with something like PCOS or endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, but you're just not seeing any shifts and changes to, or not, you're not feeling like you're able, or don't yet know how to manage or resolve some of those symptoms. So in this masterclass, we are starting at the very beginning, like what to do when you don't feel right. I'm going to walk you through why hormone testing is so vital if you want to resolve your symptoms, what testing actually gives you the answers, and how to use it as a catalyst for real transformation. I'm just going to quickly look at the comments as well. Um, is really dry skin part of perimenopause as well? It can be. Um, there could be a few other things related to that as well. The first thing that I think of is omega 3s. Um, yeah, like an omega 3 deficiency, omega 3s, or any fats and lipids that we consume in our diet produce the layer around every cell in the body, including skin cells. And when there's either not enough fats in the diet, dehydration can be another one, but if there's not enough fats in the diet or there's not enough omega 3s, that lipid layer of all the cells changes or isn't fluid enough, and that can cause some skin dryness as well. There can be a number of different issues. I'd be really interested to potentially perimenopause, but I'd be really interested to see what else is going on to get a bit more of a picture for that. So, I want to talk about the limitations of standard blood testing. Now, I want to start off by saying that medical testing is important, and I'm absolutely not saying that you shouldn't have checkups or investigations with your doctor. Okay, as a functional practitioner, it's not in my scope of practice to diagnose disease. That is for a medical doctor, an endocrinologist, a gynecologist, or an integrative doctor. I have, however, sent clients back to their doctors many times when they've been told that everything looks fine, and I'm seeing patterns of dysfunction or chronic symptoms, and know that something's not quite right. And sometimes it's meant that, sometimes it is dysfunction and there's nothing pathologically wrong that can be diagnosed. And other times it's helped women to get the diagnosis that they really need. We know that it takes on average 7 years for a woman to be diagnosed with endometriosis. So that is 7 years of struggling through heavy, painful periods, through IBS symptoms, and so many other, like debilitating symptoms that endometriosis can cause. So, just another note on this as well, that everything I share is for information and educational purposes only. It is not intended as personalized medical or healthcare advice. I don't know your health history for anyone listening to this. I don't know anything about you, so please just know that this is for information and education purposes only. So let's talk about standard blood tests. So what you would get done through your doctor. And what are they actually checking for? So, say you go to your doctor, you discuss the symptoms you're experiencing, they run a few blood tests that are relevant, and that Medicare allows for. So, there is limitations when it comes to the medical system. This is not any sort of, I'm not having a go at any individual doctors here, but there is limitations how the system's set up and how Medicare is set up that allows doctors to basically say yes or no to certain testing. And that is why often women are being given really basic bloods and not getting a lot of answers from that because not enough testing is being done, or they have to like push or really advocate for further testing. They get pushed back on certain tests or told things like, well, hormones fluctuate, so we don't need to test them, and things like that, which is actually, hormones do fluctuate, but we still need to look at them and still need to know what's going on. Now, certainly our symptoms can give a big picture, but the data, the blood testing is really helpful to actually confirm and actually get an understanding of what is truly happening because, symptoms can be multifactorial in their cause. So, a couple of other things, limitations with standard blood tests is they're not designed to assess dysfunction. They're designed to assess disease, pathological disease, to be diagnosed with something. The range of when you look at a test, the result of a test, doctors are looking at what is a conventional range. They're basically looking at, if you fall outside of this range, you may be diagnosed with something, or something's out of range that needs further investigating, or isn't right, isn't normal, isn't healthy. Now, that is quite a wide range. And the other thing you have to understand is that the reference ranges that are used are not actually related to the disease. The reference ranges are the average of the population. So those reference ranges for a lot of tests have actually shifted and changed over time. The problem with that is a lot of our population is quite sick. A lot of our population. I think the latest data is something like 1 in 3 have at least one diagnosable disease. So that reference range is looking at the population's average, which may mean that you come up as normal in something, but you're still experiencing dysfunction. As a functional practitioner, I'm looking at a much narrower range. I'm looking at what is actually optimal. If TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, the normal reference range is 1 to 4 or even 1 to 4.5 for some labs, I'm looking at you sitting between 1 and 2. It's a hugely different range. I know those numbers don't make sense to a lot of people, and it doesn't need to. The point is that the range that I'm looking at is, and the way that a functional practitioner will interpret the data, we're looking for completely different things. And as I said, it's nothing like against, like, we need those medical tests, right? They're really important. It's just that functional practitioners just work really differently. The other thing is that for some tests, it's a snapshot in time, so not always reflective of what's going on completely. It just depends on what the test is there. That's not always a bad thing. Mistimed testing, which leads to inaccurate conclusions. Now, this happens probably more often than would be expected. So what I mean by this is there's certain days of your menstrual cycle that certain hormones, when it comes to menstrual cycle hormones, should be tested so that we can actually understand what is happening. So for example, most of the time, things like follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, estrogen needs to be tested on day 2 or 3 of your cycle. That is when hormones are at the lowest. It gives us the baseline of your hormones and tells us things like, are you actually clearing estrogen? There may be a couple of times where we look at estrogen at another peak in the cycle, but generally that's what we need to look at. The other one is progesterone. Now, progesterone we only make in the luteal phase of our cycle after we ovulate. Progesterone peaks at around 5 to 7 days post ovulation. And so that's when it needs to be tested. What we need to look at is, what is your actual peak of progesterone? What is the most amount that you are producing in that cycle to tell us, are you actually making enough progesterone? As just one sort of part of the cycle. Now, what happens with progesterone? Rarely does it get tested because doctors will say, well, you don't really know when you're ovulating, or they will say progesterone is day 21. So day 21 progesterone test. So I want you to take this on day 21 of your cycle. The problem with that is they're assuming that every woman has a 28-day cycle and that you ovulate on day 14, which is not always the case, especially if you're experiencing symptoms of hormonal dysfunction. I was working with a client who had been put on progesterone treatment. because her progesterone tests were coming back as low. Now, she was already diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and she had a 35 to 40-day cycle, an irregular cycle. And when I asked her, she was like, I'm always getting progesterone tested on day 21. That's what my doctor told me to do. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense because you haven't even ovulated by day 21. If your cycle is 35 to 40 days, you wouldn't have ovulated. Once ovulation occurs, you get a period, generally 12 to 14 days after that. And actually knowing the luteal phase length is really, really important because if it's slightly less than 12 days, I've seen anywhere from sort of 10 to 12 days, we know that there's something going on with the luteal phase. You're not making enough progesterone. Your body's not under the influence of progesterone for long enough. And that can cause a lot of different symptoms, impacts fertility, and many, many other things. But my point to this is that timing of testing is really important, especially when it comes to hormones. The other thing is that standard blood tests don't look at the upstream causes. So, sure, your hormones might be imbalanced, but why? Our hormones are always responding to our external and internal environment. So, things like stress, gut dysbiosis, inflammation, many, many other things, nutrient deficiencies. There's always other causes of our hormones. It's not the hormones themselves. Um, Consult time, like you go into the doctor, you spend 10 minutes in there. There's not enough time for them to really get an understanding of what is going on for you, and have that proper interpretation of like why something could be happening. And then I've already talked about that using normal pathology ranges. Um, I think that's all I wanted to mention about the limitations. I know that, like, as I said, not the fault of doctors. There are some incredible doctors out there. This is the medical system, the Medicare model, and that is completely okay when it comes to diagnosing pathology. It's just that for many, many women, they're experiencing symptoms of dysfunction outside of it actually being diagnosed at something. And we don't want to wait until you're diagnosed with something to do something about it. I think the worst advice that I have heard women, or that women have told me that they've been given, is like, let's just wait and watch. Wait and watch for what? Because I can tell you that two things happen when you wait and watch. Either nothing changes or things get worse. And I would just like, it is my absolute passion to catch women at that phase before things get to that point. Certainly, I work with women, many, many women who have already been diagnosed with different conditions, but I would say most of the time, it's symptoms of dysfunction where they're just really unsure what is going on, and just not feeling right at all. I also know, and I share this with passion because every week I sit with women who feel that they have experienced being dismissed or unheard, and I've experienced that personally as well through my own health journey, as well. Um, I was diagnosed with PCOS. I was told that birth control was my only option. I was told that nutrition and lifestyle had nothing to do with my symptoms. I had to advocate many, many times for tests. I was diagnosed with PCOS a long time ago. I was in my early 20s. I'm just about to turn 40. And at the time, PCOS was looked at as, the women with PCOS were all overweight or struggling with their weight. And so every time I would go to the doctor, they're like, you don't have PCOS. And I'm like, I've literally been diagnosed. And it would be such a struggle and to advocate anytime symptoms worsened or anything sort of popped up. And it took me a really long time to actually get to a deeper understanding of like why I had my symptoms and how, like what was actually triggering them, and then how to resolve them. Um, I would really love to see the day that medicine and functional practitioners come together a little bit more, but I digress. So, two pathways for getting tested. One, you can advocate through your GP. So, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Speak to your GP. The best thing to do is go in prepared. Talk to them about the symptoms you're experiencing. Please let them know if they are chronic symptoms, if you're experiencing them for a long period of time, like let them know. If you have any family medical history, even if you don't think it's relevant, let them know. Especially things like cancer, autoimmune conditions. If your family had, like your mum, your sisters, your aunties all have history of like really painful, heavy periods, like let them know all of the information that you can so that you can advocate for a reason for getting those tests done. If you are, concerned about, or if you suspect something like PCOS or endometriosis, let them know. ask them to be tested for that, or if you can be screened for that. Certainly, I think the more open conversations that you have, you're giving them more reason and more ability to then be able to order the tests that you're really wanting. The other way, you can also use independent labs. There is a website called iscreen.com.au. Anyone can actually access this, can literally go onto the website, choose the test they want to have done without a medical appointment, pay for those tests. They email you a referral to then go and take to a pathology lab. They've got a list of the labs that accept it. Most labs do. You go and have the bloods done, and then the results get emailed to you. Now, of course, the limitations of that is, yeah, you could look at the tests, but you're probably wanting someone to interpret those for you. But that is accessible, and I find that really helpful for, I work with clients who really understand maybe the condition they have, whether it's Hashimoto's or PCOS or something like that, where they like to have ongoing tests done, and they've gotten to the point of really understanding their body and their symptoms, and they just like to have those ongoing tests without having to go through a GP, and they're happy to look at them themselves and then decide for themselves whether they want to go and see their GP or a practitioner or something like that. So I think that's a really great option to make things, more accessible. And then the other option that depends on what is going on for you, whether I would recommend these to one of my clients, but I do use functional tests as well. There's a number of different functional tests, but the two main ones I use is the Dutch test, the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, which I'm going to talk to you about, and the complete microbiome mapping test, which is a gut test. Both of these require practitioner referrals from a functional practitioner that does functional testing. So they're incredible tests that I will go through as well. Now, obviously, these are all out-of-pocket costs if you do iScreen or any of those functional tests. Whereas if you're getting tests done, the basic bloods done through Medicare, most of that, if not all, should be covered through Medicare. So, key blood tests I recommend. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into every single one of these because honestly, I will be here all night talking to you about different tests. I'm going to just run through some of the basics. I'm actually going to email you guys along with the replay. You're actually also going to get my hormone test guide. And in this, we'll detail all of these plus some other tests and actually what they mean. Like, what do they mean, and when in your cycle do you need to have them done, so that you've got that information on hand. If you ever then go to the doctor, get some tests, you can look at your slip and go, okay, cool, I've got like estrogen. I know that I need to do it on this specific day of my menstrual cycle. So for hormone markers, like specifically for the menstrual cycle, we're looking at follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, they need to be done on day 2 or 3 of your menstrual cycle. So day 1 is the first day of your full bleed. If you get spotting before your period, don't count that as day 1. Day 1 is always the day of full bleed. So day 2 or 3, reason for that I mentioned before is that our hormones drop once our period comes in, and it's day two or 3 as they drop will actually become the lowest. That's our baseline of hormones. The reason why we want to look at these two then is because we want to look at the ratio between the two and make sure that luteinizing hormone, and we'll make sure they're in the right ratio, because luteinizing hormone is the hormone that actually spikes at ovulation to release the egg at ovulation, whereas follicle stimulating hormone is the one that from the brain that actually signals to the ovaries to mature and develop eggs to be ready for ovulation. Now, that can give us some information around how your hormones are functioning from a brain down, and also tell us, it can indicate things like PCOS if luteinizing hormone is consistently high throughout the cycle or when it shouldn't be in the cycle. Estrogen as well, day 2 or 3, same reason, like baseline of hormones. We need to see if you're actually clearing estrogen properly to understand if there's, being contributed, symptoms are being contributed by estrogen dominance. And I'm so sorry if you can hear my dog snoring in the background. He loves to be with me whenever I'm working. So he's under my feet, and he's a big 60-kilo Roddy, and he snores loudly sometimes. Dutty. Anyway, we'll keep going. Now, if any androgen hormones, things like testosterone, androstenedione, they can be done on day 2 or 3 as well. Same as sex hormone binding globulin. Again, I won't go into these, like have a look in the test guide. The main one I wanted to talk about here was progesterone. So I mentioned this before, like progesterone needs to be done 5 to 7 days. I just usually say 7 because it's easier. 7 days post confirmed ovulation. You cannot go by an app that just predicts oh, your cycle's 30 days, so you probably ovulate 14 days prior to that. Don't trust your app. You need to go by your body. Your body will tell you when you ovulate. Cervical mucus changes. At ovulation, it becomes sticky egg white consistency, like literally you could stretch it between your fingers. Or you might notice just when you go to the toilet, you might notice extra discharge. You might notice it being that sticky white consistency. Or you need to actually chart your basal body temperature daily. So thermometer under the tongue or a digital wearable. So I use the temp drop because I use it because I use a natural fertility awareness method as contraception. So I wear that on my arm every single night. It tracks my temperature to an app. I can see my temperature. I can see when I've ovulated. I can confirm that ovulation has actually happened. What that also tells me is when you track your basal body temperature, tells us so much more than just that you've ovulated. It actually gives us a bit of an indication of like how thyroid hormones are functioning, and also progesterone, that not only are you getting enough of a peak of progesterone, but is progesterone being maintained through the whole luteal phase? Our temperature will tell us that because progesterone rises our temperature, our metabolic rate and our temperature in the second half of the cycle. So progesterone, 7 days post confirmed ovulation. The other thing you can use if neither of those options, like if you feel like basal body temperature tracking feels too much for you, you can use an ovulation predictor kit. Just be mindful if you have PCOS, it may not work for you because some women with PCOS will get false positives to that because it's looking for luteinizing hormone, for the spike in luteinizing hormone. And some women with PCOS will have high luteinizing hormone throughout their cycle. Okay, so that's hormones. We then want to look at like why are those hormones out of balance, or why, even if it's not your hormones, even if you've got nothing going on with your menstrual cycle, maybe there's other symptoms, chronic fatigue, recurrent low iron, difficulty losing weight, some of those perimenopause changes. Maybe it's something else that's going on for you. We want to look at like what are those deeper root causes? What are some of the other things we can look at when it comes to standard bloods? A thyroid panel, always with women, especially, I would say, especially postpartum. I see the most changes to thyroid in postpartum women. Even the triggering of thyroid autoimmune conditions. Dachi, you're snoring. Thyroid autoimmune conditions because of the, pregnancy and the shift in hormones and the restructuring and changes that happen to the physical body, the immune system, the gut, like so many things that happen there metabolically. It's a stress, and thyroid is like it's like a major stress test for the thyroid. The thyroid really is impacted by a lot of stress. So when it comes to the thyroid, when it comes to getting tests through your doctor, 9 times out of 10, they will only test TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. Again, a brain hormone that signals to the thyroid to start making thyroid hormones. If that is out of range, they may look at some other things, or if you've got a family history of, Hashimoto's or Graves or something like that, they may look at some other thyroid hormones, but very less likely. But what we actually need to see to really understand the thyroid, especially if there's symptoms of thyroid dysfunction, is like the full thyroid panel, TSH, and then your actual thyroid hormones. Free T4, which is inactive thyroid, that then gets converted to free T3, which is your active thyroid hormone, and then also thyroid antibodies, which is anti-TPO and anti-TG, and that tells us, and there's also anti-TSH, which very less likely gets tested. And that will tell us if there's any autoimmune activity happening against the thyroid, and then also whether our body's actually producing and converting enough thyroid hormone. And each of those things will actually tell us something different about the thyroid function. If there's no antibodies, but you're not converting, that tells us there's a nutritional problem, likely, because the conversion of inactive to active thyroid hormone requires a lot of nutrients, iron, zinc, vitamin A, selenium, B vitamins, carbohydrates. There's a number of nutrients that need to be utilized there. So thyroid, and I would say, yeah, that's a really, really common one that I always look at. Even with women with other conditions like PCOS, there can be an overlap with thyroid conditions as well. Iron studies. So when we look at iron, Often iron, the full iron panel will be done, but sometimes just ferritin is looked at. Now, ferritin is just our storage form of iron and it doesn't tell us what's actually happening, like how is the body actually utilizing and transporting iron around the body. Give me 2 seconds. Came a little late. A little late. He is snoring so loud. So, ferritin, our storage form of iron, but then we also want to see like iron. How is like what is our blood levels of iron? Transferrin saturation, which is like how hungry is the body for iron and how is it being transported or is it being transported adequately around the body to be utilized in cells. And then the other one to that is actually a full blood count because on a full blood count is hemoglobin. We want to make sure that iron isn't affecting our hemoglobin levels because if iron's low, hemoglobin can start to drop, and that is when you will really notice the effects of low iron because of oxygen delivery through the red blood cells. So, the other one is, oh, and just on iron, I just want to mention as well, really important if you have hairy periods to be monitoring iron. We need to look at if iron is recurrently low, we need to look at why that is happening. You don't just have low iron, it's either a combination of dietary, inflammation, gut absorption, heavy periods, and then we need to look at like why is that happening, and then correct that. So it's not just about like supplementing with iron or taking your liver, but actually like why are we getting that in the first place? And let's correct that. Our metabolic markers, so really important for things like perimenopause, PCOS, fatigue, sugar cravings, recurrent thrush, difficulty losing weight, feeling really sluggish, tired. I think I said fatigue. Feeling really like jittery, like if you're getting those like blood sugar crashes. We want to look at like what's happening with our metabolic health. We want to look at our, sorry, I just had to make sure I was still recording. I just had this moment of like, oh my gosh, am I recording? We want to look at metabolic markers. So HbA1c is a marker of our blood sugar levels, like average blood sugar levels over a 3-month period. So really good one to kind of monitor, like how's blood glucose been looking. Fasting glucose and fasting insulin. Often, like only one of those will get done. If there's really something metabolically going on, I want to know both of those because both of those I can actually calculate something called HOMA-IR, which is a marker of insulin resistance. Sometimes fasting insulin will look semi-normal or a little bit high. Fasting glucose might look semi-normal or a little bit high, or one of those will be normal and the other one actually high, but together they give us the full picture of like insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. And that's really important because that actually changes what we would do when it comes to strategies to getting your metabolic health back in action so that you can either lose weight, get better energy, better moods, feel better, all of that kind of thing. Liver panel plays into this as well because the liver detoxifies, our hormones, plays a role, detoxifies toxins, all of the sort of things coming into the body. And when the liver becomes quite sluggish or stagnant, it can impact a number of different things, including our metabolic health and including estrogen dominance. And then we have nutritional markers, vitamin D, B12, folate, and zinc, probably the most common and most important ones in terms of blood levels. There's certain ones that we would rarely look for in the blood, like magnesium. It's very unlikely unless you have an actual diagnosed condition where there's something, something nothing to do with hormones, but like something else wrong, that something like magnesium would go out of range in the blood because the body works so hard at keeping things like magnesium and calcium in a very tight range in the blood, and it's actually at a tissue level that you would become deficient in magnesium, so we don't really test that through the blood. So nutrients that actually are important to look at in the blood is the iron, the vitamin D, B12, folate, and zinc. Vitamin D, so important. It is not just about sunlight. It is not just about it plays such a big role in our hormone health. Okay, so other than that, I've got more tests in the hormone test guide. So have a squiz through that. You can get a deeper understanding of each of those tests and then look at like what's actually most important for you to get tested because it's very unlikely that you're going to get everything tested. we're going to look at what's most important. Doctors are going to look at what's most important. Okay, so I wanted to just touch on, I briefly mentioned and talked about this, about functional versus conventional testing, on what the difference is. So conventional being that medical testing, looking for the disease, looking for pathology, looking at that much wider range, compared to functional, where we're looking at an optimal, narrower range when it comes to the results, but also looking for dysfunctional patterns, and the root cause to why those things are actually dysfunctional. And that's where it's not just about the test, it's also about your symptom picture. It is also about your health history, about your current diet and lifestyle, and what you're doing, and how your internal and external environment is impacting your health and your body, and your symptoms. And I always like to say to women, because many women will come to me feeling really frustrated, feeling like their body's broken, feeling like their body's working against them, feeling like they've done something wrong. And it is none of those things. We literally live in an environment and in a lifestyle, our modern lives, that is not conducive to optimal health. Our food system is not conducive to optimal health. We are bombarded and influenced by food marketing that is deceitful. I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I'm sorry if I trigger anyone with this. I don't share this as fear mongering. I share this as information. You can take parts of it, all of it, none of it, whatever on board that feels right for you to understand and to sort of take on board for you right now. It's literally not about fear mongering. It is just like, cool, what can we actually do about this, and what can we do to optimize our health? But food system, really just stressful lives. We carry the load a lot. Women that I work with are carrying such a load of, not all of them mothering, but many of my clients mothering, of work, of aging parents, of just going through so much in life, and it can be a lot to hold, and that can impact the body in many, many different ways. The impact that chronic stress has on our gut health and our hormones is phenomenal, and our bodies can get stuck in this repetitive cycle, of being kind of caught in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, and not into parasympathetic nervous system rest, digest, reproduce state. That actually helps to heal the body. So it's not about doing anything right or wrong. It's literally just, how can we make some changes and optimize our lifestyle in a way that fits in with modern life, but is also going to be really, really supportive, so that we show up and feel the best and function the best that we can. So when it comes to functional testing, so I'm going to talk about the Dutch test and the complete microbiome mapping. This is where, when blood tests don't give us enough information, that functional testing can be really, really helpful. Or if you've got complex symptoms, like many, many different symptoms that don't sort of seem to add up, if you've got chronic fatigue that you're not getting answers for, inflammatory type symptoms, complex hormonal symptoms where you're just not getting answers through blood tests, or just not getting any resolution, or not able to sort of manage and change anything that's going on, we need to start to look deeper and consider functional testing if that is in your budget to do so, because it definitely is an investment. I will say this, it just depends on the person and what's going on for them, and also their budget, as to whether I would recommend functional testing to start with. For many women, blood tests and actually spending the money to make changes to their diet and lifestyle, investing the time and money and effort into that is going to be more important first before functional testing. For others, they're like, I just want the answers. I don't want to go around in circles with this, or I've done all of that before and I'm not getting answers. I'm ready to invest in functional testing, and that's where this can be really, really helpful. So, and the two tests that I use most often is the Dutch test. So dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. Now, this is an at-home test. It's a urine test. These kind of things, they come in test kits. They send you all of the instructions on everything to do, and you would then complete the test, send it back to the lab, and then I would get the results for those, and we would go through those together. So this is looking at a really comprehensive view of your hormones, of your stress hormones, of your detoxification pathways, but also the production and metabolism of hormones. So it's not just like, what's estrogen doing in the blood? It's literally, how much are you producing, how much are you metabolizing, and what pathways are you metabolizing estrogen particularly down? So estrogen gets metabolized down 3 pathways in the liver. One of those is protective, one of those is quite toxic, and can contribute to, really significant estrogen dominant symptoms, even if overall estrogen looked fairly normal. And the other one is sort of mid-range, not very great at all. So not great, but not protective, is what I was trying to say. So we look at that really comprehensive view, like what is your estrogen actually doing? And then what it's actually doing gives us the answers for like how we can actually manage that better, because there will be different strategies if you just, had a lot of estrogen, you were just making a lot of estrogen, but your liver was sluggish and your methylation pathways are not allowing that to be eliminated out of the body, to if you're just producing estrogen, but it's going down one of those really toxic pathways because the detoxification like pathway is not functioning, like the protective pathway is not functioning properly. It also looks at, looks at progesterone. It looks at your cortisol rhythm. So our cortisol, there's a lot of talk about cortisol at the moment. People are like, don't do anything to like spike your cortisol. And everyone's so stressed about cortisol. They're probably getting stressed about cortisol. I get stressed looking at it sometimes, looking at all the content online about, oh my gosh, don't do anything that's going to spike your cortisol. But honestly, our cortisol, it works in a rhythm. It peaks in the morning. It's meant to peak in the morning, and then it tapers off throughout the day. And as it flatlines at night, it drops down to allow melatonin to rise to get us into a deep sleep. Now, if that pattern is disrupted, it not only disrupts the stress signaling to the body, like impacts energy production, but it'll also then impact sleep because it'll impact the way that melatonin is produced. So if that, we don't want to just look at like cortisol in the morning or cortisol at any time of the day. We actually want to look at like, what's your rhythm doing? Is it doing what it's meant to and you're just not producing enough? Are you producing too much? Is the rhythm completely off? And all of those will have different strategies. And I'll talk about a client in a moment when it comes to that. And then it looks at other things, organic acids, so oxidative stress in the body, B vitamin markers, your melatonin, adrenal hormones. It's really incredible for complex hormonal issues, for estrogen dominance, for low progesterone or luteal phase issues, for chronic fatigue, perimenopause, or a family history of estrogen dominant cancers. Um, this is just a little bit, this is only a very small snapshot of some of the markers in the Dutch test. Now, you certainly don't need to understand this. I'm just going to talk about a client of mine who had a Dutch test done. She had multiple tests done. She had been through, she had a really great doctor that tested so many different things for her. Kind of like they came up with the, like, you're probably just in perimenopause. But she felt awful, and it's like we're not living life like that. There's something that we can certainly do for that. So we looked at the Dutch test, and what it came back with is she had really high estrogen, but what we saw was that, and it looks at the different types of estrogen. What we saw is that a lot of her estrogen was being metabolized down the reactive pathway, and also that she had poor methylation. So methylation is a pathway in the body. Is a lot of B vitamins are utilized for methylation, particularly it's B9, so folate, B6, B9, B12. If there's some issues with that, you're going to have an issue with clearing estrogen. So she was having this clearance issue. She was making a lot of estrogen and not clearing it. And it was also going down the reactive pathway, so creating a lot of oxidative stress in her body. So we knew that she was getting the, chronic fatigue, partly the chronic fatigue for that, but the PMS as well. We then looked at her cortisol, and interestingly, her doctor had tested cortisol, her morning cortisol, and it looked within the normal range. And I sort of thought that's really interesting because your symptom picture isn't matching that at all. Your body is telling me it's under significant stress, and the fact that your cortisol is looking just, fairly average doesn't make any sense to me. When we looked at the Dutch test, what was actually happening is that her body was making a significant amount of cortisol, so under loads and loads of stress. She was clearing loads of that cortisol, but what happens is because her body was under so much stress, making so much cortisol, it wasn't, not very much was being converted to the active form of cortisol. So she was getting really flatline cortisol rhythm, like it just wasn't doing the peak and drop. It was just completely flatlined. So her energy was really flat throughout the day, which meant that her melatonin was being released much later in the night. And she was waking up feeling just absolutely rubbish because melatonin was still high when it should have cleared. Yeah, like we realized that actually your body's making lots of cortisol, but it's protecting you. It's protecting you and it's not converting it to this active form. because there's so much there being made. So it made a lot more sense once we saw this information on the Dutch test, and then meant we had a better understanding of the strategies that we could use for that. So some of the interventions that we did with her was circadian rhythm rebalance. So really looking at her light and dark environment and to impact the signaling of hormones in the brain. We looked at increasing cruciferous veggies to help with detoxification, flaxseed, B vitamins, all for that like methylation detoxification pathway. So this is not about like, just going on a detox. It's literally like, what do we need to do like long term and lifestyle and intervention wise. We also did some gut health work to help her clear out that estrogen load as well. And then nervous system support because she had, quite a bit of anxiety. And yeah, just looked at incorporating some really nice like self-care practices for her that felt really good. Her PMS has resolved her and her moods are a lot more stable. Her energy is coming back now. Like I would say with chronic fatigue, it's probably one of the most challenging things if it's like really true chronic fatigue, um, to sort of improve. But the circadian rhythm work that we did was really, really helpful for that. And then obviously calming down the nervous system as well. So such a good outcome. Always such a good outcome when we get the data. And then the next one, I'm almost done, guys, as well. The next one, the complete gut microbiome mapping test. This is an at-home stool test. It is a comprehensive view of both your gut function. So how is your gut actually digestive wise? Like how is the gut functioning in terms of things like breaking down, fats and digestive enzymes and things that need to be utilized. Also markers of things like inflammation in the gut, leaky gut markers, immune gut function, and then your microbiome. So this really looks at the microbiome. We're looking at pathogens, so bacterial overgrowths or infections, fungal like candidas, and parasitic infections as well. And then also looking at your healthy bacteria levels. So, and the specific strains and species of those. So, like, do you actually have enough healthy bacteria? Because I will say that every time I have run a complete gut microbiome mapping test, there's never been enough healthy bacteria in there. And that is why the overgrowth or the infection happens in the first place, or why the gut has become really dysfunctional, is because we don't see enough healthy bacteria and a diversity of healthy bacteria, because it's not just about a couple of strains. Like we really need diversity, and that comes down to both our diet and lifestyle. So stress is a really big one, toxins are a really big one, but also like our health history as well. So a lot of us have had, a history of like antibiotic use and things like that that have wiped out a lot of the gut, which is, sometimes these things just happen, and then it's, the antibiotics were needed, but we've never done any work to kind of correct that and to help to repopulate the gut. So yeah, this test is incredible for anyone with chronic and unexplained digestive issues, digestive symptoms. Skin issues is a really big one. Autoimmunity, food intolerances, and fatigue. Also, can I just say, it just popped into my mind, IBS. If you have a diagnosis of IBS, it's not a diagnosis. You don't have lifelong IBS. It is a symptom. IBS is a symptom of something going on. We need to look for the root cause, and the gut microbiome test is incredible for that. So we actually find out. The second part to this I want to say, because I get asked a lot about this, is people going, oh, I think I've got food intolerances. I want to do a food intolerance test. I do not run food intolerance tests. The reason for that is they're really inaccurate. There's not enough data to even show their accuracy. But the big part to this is actually that not all, there are true food intolerances. There are lifelong food intolerances, especially things like, non-celiac gluten sensitivity. There are other food intolerances that you can certainly have. But when it comes to you experiencing so much food intolerance, like you're just intolerant and not digesting lots of different types of foods, that is a gut dysfunction and a microbiome dysfunction, not an actual food intolerance. And when you work on healing the leaky gut, healing the inflammation, correcting the immune system, correcting the microbiome, a lot of those food intolerances will then correct themselves, and we can reintroduce those foods back in, which is just incredible. We want diet diversity, and not for you having to live with like 101 different food intolerances. So Again, just a really tiny snapshot. There's multiple pages on the gut microbiome mapping test. This is only a small part of it. But I'm working with a client at the moment who was diagnosed with PCOS, has, quite a lot of acne. She's in her 30s and still dealing with acne. She's also got anxiety, was put on anti-anxiety medication, and fatigue. And she's just sort of like, felt like no matter what she does and no matter what she eats, she just feels bloated constantly and just feels completely sluggish constantly. So straight up, we did the complete microbiome mapping because there's lots of different symptoms gut-wise that she was experiencing. And I was like, look, we just need to know what's actually going on in there because there is a slightly different treatment strategy depending on the bacteria, the overgrowth, the infection, and things that are actually happening in there. It's not just one gut protocol for everyone. It's really personalized to your results. So what we found for her is she had a parasitic overgrowth of blastocystis hominis, which can contribute to things like loose bowels and many other symptoms. She had some opportunistic bacteria that overgrew. So we sometimes have low levels of some opportunistic bacteria, things like strep and staph and some other things that can be in really, really low levels. And what happens is when the gut becomes dysfunctional, we don't have enough healthy bacteria. These are allowed to flourish and overgrow in that kind of environment. So she had that. She also had really low levels of healthy bacteria, like I mentioned before. Like there was a couple of strains that were really unusually high, but then most of her like good strains that we're really wanting lots of like a variety of lactobacillus, a variety of bifidobacteria, all really low, which made sense as to why she was bloated from so many different foods because these bacteria actually, a lot of these ferment things like carbohydrates. So, you might have heard of the low FODMAP diet or FODMAPs, but those fermentable carbohydrates, everything from onion, garlic's leek, to legumes, to dairy, to different types of vegetables, they all carry different types of fermented foods, fermentable fibers that bacteria actually breaks down for us. And when we don't have the right bacteria or enough of that, we can get a lot of fermentation happening. So what we have been doing to just working with her recently, actually, and what we've been doing to correct this is the protocol for her is we're starting off with actually healing leaky gut first. Because if we just throw in antimicrobials or throw in some kind of, I don't know, probiotics, it's just going to worsen everything and it's going to exacerbate her skin. So we want to heal that gut lining, reduce the inflammation, calm down the immune system first. Do a little bit of that first. We did some changes to her diet as well so that we're not feeding these overgrowths and we're not exacerbating any symptoms. So literally just back to basics to calm everything down, bring the body back to like a baseline essentially. We will then go in with some antimicrobials and antiparasitics to kill off the overgrowth, the infections. And at the same time use some like binders, certain types of fibers in supplement form to bind to both the bacteria that's being killed off and the toxins that they can release, bind it and release it, eliminate it out of the body. And then we'll go in with some probiotics to help to repopulate the gut. So there is a process and a protocol. There is an order of operations that we need to do. At the same time, we're making changes to her nutrition. And at the same time, we're supporting her nervous system. Once the gut is in a state like this of inflammation, of dysbiosis, of leaky gut, there's going to be a lot of nervous system dysregulation, a lot of anxiety, a lot of mood changes. So the anxiety piece, instead of just being labeled with anxiety, we now have a reason that, this could be happening because there's such a deep connection between the gut and the mood. Gut-brain axis really impacts our mental health. So in 2 weeks, before she'd barely started on the nutrition, but before she'd barely gotten started on any supplements, her skin calmed down quite a lot. Like her acne was quite inflamed and red and really painful looking. And it calmed down and she'd never seen it like that for such a long time, even in a short time. So I'm really excited to see her continued journey because I know that she's going to get really incredible results and incredible resolution for the way that she's been feeling. Okay, so now you have an understanding of like why testing is so important and what tests you need to get the answers that you deserve. I also just want to talk really briefly about how to turn that data into real health transformation, because one of the biggest things is that there's so much information out there. Getting testing done can feel really empowering. You finally get answers, right? You finally feel like it's not all in my head. You feel really validated with what you're experiencing, that there's something actually going on inside your body, and you no longer feel stuck because you have the answers that you can then move forward with. And that's an incredible thing. And that's why I love the data. But the common trap that I see is that getting test results don't equal transformation, right? And I experienced this when I was diagnosed with PCOS in my 20s. I was like, okay, now I've kind of got answers as to why I'm fatigued and I have acne and anxiety and my periods are all over the place or completely missing, why I'm getting thrush every month. And I started working with a naturopath at the time, and I was taking hundreds of dollars of supplements every month. And then every time I was like taking them for so long, not making any changes to my nutrition. That's a whole nother story to like why I didn't actually make changes there. Um, but every time I stopped the supplements, I went backwards. I was literally just relying on supplements. And I thought this can't be right. I can't just be living on hundreds of dollars worth of supplements every month. I just really want to see my skin clear. I just really want my periods to be semi-regular without having to spend, like, don't get me wrong, I use supplements in my clinic for, healing. They're incredible, but there needs to be nutrition and lifestyle changes to correct how we got into the symptoms that we are currently in the first place. So supplements are actually important. I'm just highlighting the fact that I did the supplements without the actual other parts. And so for a long time I was doing that and not getting the health transformation. It wasn't until until I studied that I got a much deeper understanding. And as I've learned and grown through my journey, really having a deep understanding of my body and myself and my lifestyle and the things that trigger my body, the things that it doesn't like so much, how I need to nourish and support my body, has been what has actually led to health transformation. And the other part to that is that there was mindset shifts, there was identity shifts, there was deeper work that had to be done to actually integrate the information that I was being given, or the strategies that I was being given, so that I would actually integrate them and actually do them consistently and follow through with them and get those results. And that is the same common trap that I see. I've worked with women before who have done lots of supplements and lots of protocols and things, and then we've had to kind of work on those deeper reasons why things weren't shifting and changing, and really look at our lifestyle. And not in a I never look at, even when I do it for myself, I never look at what I've been doing with criticism. It is literally an observation. Like if I get a symptom that pops up, if I get a flare of something that pops up, it is never with criticism or judgment, or like I should have done better, or I should have done this differently, or I should have done something else. It is literally just with compassionate inquiry of like, oh, that's interesting that my body's responding like that. I wonder why, and I wonder what's been going on for the last few months, or the last however long that I've been experiencing these symptoms. I wonder why I am experiencing that. And can utilize that information to move forward. It's always with compassion and grace when we go through healing. I do go off on tangents a lot, don't I? Really, this was just a real, just wanted to share that because I think that piece is really, really important. And I think that's where sometimes that women can feel really unsupported or really unsure with how to move forward, because it's not just about knowing the protocols or the supplements to take, but it really is about that deeper change that we make, and getting to, like, what I love to teach women is like when you start to learn more about your body and yourself, you can feel more trusting and more confident, that, or one, that you will integrate the information that you're receiving. You just feel more confident and trusting in that. But two, that actually it's going to be okay, and actually you're going to be able to get through the healing and get to the other side and optimize your health and feel really well. I have a really deep belief in the body's ability to heal. And one thing that I do a lot of is make sure that I have, or that I'm looking for that reality, in the sense of like following people online or looking up to other mentors and practitioners and things that are doing this incredible work as well, and seeing people transform their health. That's a really important piece. Something that I recommend that you all do. Look for people that are transforming their health. Um, okay, so true transformation, like I mentioned, requires, we get the comprehensive data, we go through like a healing phase, correcting the dysfunction that's happening in your body, correcting nutritional deficiencies. We look at personalized nutrition and lifestyle strategies that are going to be really supportive, both for the healing phase and then for health optimization. Nervous system and mindset support, because they play such a big role in your health. And then, that comes with like ongoing coaching and accountability. That ongoing support is what's really helpful. And then also teaching you how to understand your triggers means that you can respond early before your symptoms. If you experience a flare at another time in your life, maybe it's that under stress, your menstrual cycle starts to become irregular, and you can start to pinpoint that pattern. So if it happens, like, hey, my body's just telling me it needs some extra support right now. Okay, so that's it. I've thrown a lot of information at you. I hope that was really helpful, really, really insightful when it comes to, particularly testing, but just health in general, gut health, hormones, and all of those things in between, because it's all so interconnected. If you did want to work with me, there's two ways to work with me in 2026. The first one is one-on-one. So one-on-one consults, we would, obviously look at all of that testing and a personalized strategy and work together on that. Later in the year, I don't have dates yet, but keep an eye on my socials. I will be launching the Nourished Feminine Method membership. I'll talk more about that, but you get to hear that first. It's just a monthly membership, like a cancel anytime monthly membership. And oh my gosh, the stuff that is coming together and going inside that membership is going to be just incredible, and just make this kind of health transformation more accessible for women, so that you're not spending hours Googling. But yeah, one-on-one work, especially if so, the membership has nothing to do with functional testing. One-on-one work, if you are wanting to get any functional testing, or even if you've had functional testing and want to work on like recent, and you want to work on the strategies and the mindset and the lifestyle and all of those parts, we can do that. I am fully booked up until January, but potentially have space to fit you in if you want to have a free 15-minute call with me just to chat about what's going to be most appropriate for you. And then I'll be back mid-January, the week starting, I think it's the 13th of January, for one-on-one consults on Tuesday, Thursday day, Tuesday evenings, and some Saturday mornings. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for who are watching the replay, and I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week.